So welcome to the Node API team meeting for May 14th, 2021. We'll follow our standard approach of looking at the issues we have tagged for milestone 11. So let me go there. While I do that, are there any announcements or anything that people would like to share? No, I will share my screen with that list and we can go through the list. The talk submissions for OpenJS World. I know, I guess, Gabriel, you and Kevin were working on that, right?
Yeah, so in that email that he sent, he also mentioned that he needs help finishing the slides. So I'll probably have a look at them and see what else I can put on there.
Okay, let's just take a quick look through and see, like, is there a section that...
Yeah, towards the end.
I guess it's more like...
Oh, you went past it.
Sorry.
There were a few slides which were just like his idea of what should be there. See, like this, right, and then the previous one.
Right. Okay. So I guess if you're going to take a look, maybe if you think we need help from the broader team, let us know.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's open to anybody to fill out.
So okay, so you're going to take a look at that, and otherwise,
yeah,
that's nothing else to talk about on that one.
Why is there like a small circle under Kevin's picture in that slide?
That has to do with who's looking. That's you.
Oh, okay.
It's showing us who's looking at, like, who else is looking at the different sides.
Okay. All right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this slide then. Okay, good.
We've actually used that as, like, when you've got two people and one person drives the slides.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
You can have the other person move and you can see, okay, now they want to move on to the next slide.
Ah, okay.
So just as that's a tip that we found that useful in some other ones. So
cool.
Okay, so nothing more to talk about in that one. Stale issues. I don't think I've added anything, so I don't think we have any stale issues to talk about. Modules you've noticed is ported. I don't think we've seen any new modules that were ported. I know I haven't added the debug testing. In terms of issues that were raised, we have had a good discussion. I want to I don't know if there's anything new on the intermittent crash one.
I made some comments to Anna to hopefully release her objection.
Yeah. Right. I saw the same. So yeah.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how she was thinking about us testing this. Like,
I think in general it's a good suggestion to have tests. I just don't know what to do in this case. So yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks for adding that in. I think otherwise we should be pretty much ready to go. So, and thanks. Thanks for the suggestion last time, Vladimir. I did end up, building a class, and we now have it so that it's based on the liveness of the what do you call it, Lambda, as opposed to the ref and unref before and after.
It's good.
Oh,
thank you.
I just noticed that you didn't change the variable name of the ref holder.
Ah, yeah, okay, good point. I can change that. I will do that after we finish here. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that's that one. Are there other issues that people want to pull out or call out in particular?
Yes, I have an issue on the node core, and I have found out that when we calling NOP fatal error on threads that there is no isolate on the thread, the
Which
process
issue is
will
it?
be crashing. Let me see. It's PR number the 38624.
Okay, this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately, we may be generating node reports on the thread that we don't have isolate or environment, but
right.
That's not the goal of the PR. We just are fixing the segment fault on the NAPI fatal error on worker threads, etc.
So this right here is the core of the change, right?
Yeah, right. It's very simple.
So does this affect the node report, or?
We don't
node
guarantee
report, right?
that the node report should generate when there is no isolate on the thread. You know, we can't access the isolate in different threads. So we are triggering the fatal error on worker threads that there is no isolate or environment.
I see. So in this case, but this is right, like we're trying to generate a fatal error, right?
Yeah, so we don't like say segment fault on the process, but just about there. It's a expected behavior.
Okay, because we generate an abort anyway.
Yeah, we just
because in a lot of cases for node report, if we can't get the information, the preferred thing is to just not generate that section that we can't create versus, but this looks like we should,
yeah.
at the end, we do an abort anyway, right? So this is just saying we should do it earlier.
Yeah, but I've tried to use generating node report anyway, but it requires a lot of changes in the node report code base. So I'm just adding the test case in Node API, and then we can continue the work on node report to generate as far as possible,
right?
And as much as possible on the node report.
Switch. Port fatal exception, right?
Yeah. No, it's not the exception. Exception is related to isolate and the JavaScript. So we just aborting with fatal error, which doesn't come with the exception.
Right. So this is basically.
And we don't require, like say, NAPI in the NAPI fatal error, like other NAPI functions. So that's what we expect, that the function NAPI fatal error could be used in any thread that there might be no isolate or environment.
Should it have this F-flush standard error as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds
so
great.
I'm just going to add a suggestion here. Okay, so basically we just get the, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a pretty straightforward. If it doesn't exist, don't try and do these things and just do what we do at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I added check that the process is actually exiting with SIG-abort or number 134 on Windows.
Okay. Okay, because we were getting a fatal, we were getting an error, some other error, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so basically you want people to take a look and review that one, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's good to get Jarish to look at it for sure. Okay, any others you want to bring up? people don't have any other specific ones, let's just take a quick look at, we go here and we don't say is PR, and we say node API. Right, so you got that one. It's that one we should.
Oh, this one. It's just a revert on the previously just now made on the object, but there is still double use of free issue in the place. So I just removed it, but there seems a CI failure on the case. So I'm not sure if it's related, but I will try again.
Okay.
I should try again on the CI.
Right, okay, so that's not waiting on anybody else though, right? So.
Yeah, right.
Okay, nothing's new there, so that's fine. And then let's look under node. Add-on API issues. Reference count of object wrap changed. Oh, I see you've already commented on it. Okay, well, it sounds like you're already looking at that. Unless, is there anything you want to discuss on that one, or?
No, I haven't.
No, okay.
Yep. Deep look.
Tests, okay, so this one's brand new, so unless there's anything else on those, I guess the one.
The top one is on the repo case. So I don't know, and I have no idea if we have any test covering the repo, no core repo with.
I don't think so. Where did that one go? Or was it here? Right here, okay, right.
Yeah. It's been said that it's previewing the one of the object fields, so I'm not sure if the function template is created with different flags, because the error, but I didn't have take a deep look.
Right, okay. Yeah, I suspect we have no REPL testing that uses native add-ons. I don't know if that's even like a, yeah, it's interesting whether it would be a specific, like, is it a node add-on API thing, or is it a, maybe it would happen with any add-on.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The one I thought we should spend just a minute talking about is this one. 6, is it 906? No, it's next release. Where are we? So I'm just like, I know we were trying to close out 906, but I think my take is that I'm pretty comfortable it's not anything to do with the node add-on API itself.
Sorry, back now.
Yeah. I was just talking about we're just looking at the issue around the next release. And we were kind of holding it up on figuring out 906, but I think I'm relatively comfortable that it's not an issue in node add-on API itself. So, you know, we can probably go ahead and do a set of releases anyway.
Oh yeah, that one. Right.
Right. Since we've got it, you know, since the fix in theory is in node core,
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like if we do a release, we're regressing anything. It's just that we've been more unlucky some places than others, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean the issue is root cause. The fix is on its way. And it's not a node and an API fix, so there's nothing we can do in Node.js on API. So yeah, I think I agree with you. There's no reason to hold up the release for this.
So yeah, I think to go back to we could do a 3.2 and then a 4.0 that drops support for Node 8.
Yep.
I'm just gonna fix this one typo. So I don't know, Nick, do you want to?
Okay, so with what is in the main branch, I can start to create the 3.2.0.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe you can add Paracast 999. It's only a documentation Paracast.
Sounds good. Yeah. It's pretty small too, right?
Yeah. So it's
sure. Why don't we just?
And when you land this, I don't know, later or tomorrow, I start to make these this release.
There, I'll merge it right this second. Since it's doc only, very low risk. So okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then we'll just like this, yeah, if you can do the 3.1 and then the 4.01. Basically, we just need to have one extra change, which is the versions. Do we have version support? How do we document that? Right. So the only other thing, like when the only change from that then to the 4.0 would be to change this to be 12, right?
Oh, okay. I can change when I will make the release because I need to change the current version. So if you agree, I can change these either.
Yep. Yeah, that makes total sense. So just once you can do 3.2, and then once that's out, you can
12.
just update this to 12 and then do a 4.0 kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay, any other things people think, issues or stuff we should talk about? I think the last thing we'll flip over to talk about the extracting the tests, but I just want to make sure there aren't other things in the, actually, let me go back to the main issue and make sure, but we don't have Jack, so I won't ask like on the test front, but yeah, so is there anything else we should talk about before we flip over to that? Sounds like not, so let me flip over there. So Node.js, this will be JS. So I know, Vladimir, you'd had a time to do some read. Do you want to comment first?
Yes. So what proposal here, like what if we, so technically what we discussed last time, like yesterday, that we want to have, we essentially need to recreate part of node.js infrastructure to be able to load JavaScript, execute JavaScript, and a bunch of different modules like assert, common, and for each native module. So technically, if you think like as we go through this kind of each test, because test driven from JavaScript, we have to do a lot of, there are a lot of moving parts. Effectively, before we even execute something, very first line of Node API test, we still have to do, we should assume that a lot of infrastructure already works. And if some of it is broken, we can be in trouble actually understanding what exactly is broken, because nothing would work at all. Like we would not even know where this error is because we didn't get to this test yet. So one of the proposals I have, like what if we have be more like a C++ driven test. So technically, imagine you have G-test, and G-test start to test basics. Like, for example, can I run small script as a start with? Like I'm saying, like I have a script 2 + 2, and I expect to receive 4 as the result. If I can see I can run simple tests, then I can do very interesting things. Like I can probably create eval function, so I can maybe do some small things. Like, for example, every time I want to compare two JavaScript values, I can just simply execute a small snippet inside of JavaScript and see result. So rather than having all these tests to be driven from JavaScript, what if they'll be driven first from C++ G-test? And here I'm giving examples like what Facebook did with the GSI, the JavaScript interface, which essentially just 2 files. Like one of them a header file. If you click on this first link, please, you will see that literally the whole testing suite for this API is just 2 files. TestLib CPP and TestLib H, and they kind of test in the whole this surface pretty much in similar way what we need for Node API. But what I kind of like about this approach, it's simplicity. And one of the goals what we discussed yesterday, it should be able to grab this testing suite, to bring into different repo for different implementation of Node API, and just embed it into any kind of building system you like, using CMake, whatever, Visual Studio, whatnot, it would work. And technically, at some point, I tried to mimic the approach, but the issue was like I had to convert some of these JavaScript tests into C++, and it was big work. And while I was doing it, the question was like, okay, if tomorrow Node API team changes test, what do I need to do? How to synchronize it and stuff? So I stopped doing it instead of just adopting JavaScript's tests. So it's more like a topic for discussion. It's something what we may want to consider to have this test in the end to be not JavaScript driven, but rather C++ driven.
Right. So I guess the thing is for me is like reuse, because like maintaining a whole new set of tests seems challenging, right? I could see, like, I like the point about like, if you run one of these tests and it fails, you may have a hard time knowing what's going on at all, because like you're not even to the point where you can run tests. So I could see an extra test suite which just basically was there to try and get you to the point where you're confident you can then run the bigger test suite would make sense. Because that would be a smaller thing to maintain, right? Like that would be something once written, probably doesn't change. And if that got you to the point where you could then run all the node tests, and if you don't pass that, there's no point running the other tests, right?
Good point. Actually, in a testing suite which currently exists, what I was showing last time, I do have a small set of tests for assert module, because instead of bringing the whole node.js assert implementation,
right,
which actually spans through multiple JavaScript files, I only have small subset, but I want to make sure that this small subset works in a way that I want. It reports errors in certain ways and stuff. So I do have this, for example, small G-test based tests just for assert.
So yeah, that I think would be super useful, is like, have you built the minimum requirements right, and an easier, like that could report failures more easily and stuff like that.
And the cool thing is that if we go with like the DLL based approach that we discussed, then we can test anybody's implementation of these prerequisites, right? So we can test whether the implementation of the prerequisites on Jerry script works, right? Or on what is it, JavaScript core or whatever they call it in OS 10 or whichever one Apple provides. So yeah, that's a great idea.
So we'd end up with like 2 test suites. One is like the qualification test suite, like, are you ready to run the test suite? And then the second one is, okay, now that's actually written.
Yep, that's good.
Just because, like, for me, it's like a duplicate test suite, like getting like saying here's a whole new way to test add-ons and getting that into the Node project is going to be hard. So I think trying to just reuse what's in Node but that other piece of getting there would make it so that you're not like pulling your hair out.
And the thing is, since you mentioned snippets, right? In that sense, the qualification test suite is just a bunch of snippets, right? But then so is the JS native API test suite. It's just that the snippets are much larger, right? So however you test your qualifying test suite, you can also test JS native API afterwards. You just feed it larger snippets, basically.
Yeah, good point. And actually, I should say that while I was running these tests, especially with NAPI run script, I found that they're missing one important parameter, kind of whatever script name, because for me, in order to report errors, I didn't know where this error came from.
Right.
I was finding that having some kind of source URL was something like was a big omission in this API. So I had internally had to create another one, like NAPI ext run script.
So like this would be like car star file name.
Right. I mean, const car.
Yeah. This is not meant to be the actual.
Right.
But like it's like this kind of. I don't know if this like matches kind of what you were like. I was thinking we can probably compile, like, because it gets back to that. Can you separate out the build systems?
Yeah.
We can probably compile each test down to something that has a function we can pass to a I said library instead of shared library because I think we might be able to support either. Just depends what you link on. If it's a shared library, then like on the command line, you could say, here's the one I want to test. But like I thought, it needs to be able to pass the entry points so that when you do the require later on, the require can actually basically use that function.
I also suspect that it might be useful if we made the test suite a little more consistent. So one thing, for example, would be to give the add-on the same name. Like I know we have like hello.node and binding.node and
right.
And, so if we just PR'd this upstream, like in node.js, to make sure all the bindings have the same name, then you could just hard code that, and you wouldn't have to have this mapping or parameters or anything, and we just adopt this.
But I think it needs a name. But yes, we need them to be. I think I was thinking we could just use the directory name.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But this way,
you're right.
the way it is now, you need both. You need the directory name and the name of the add-on, and that's just superfluous information.
Why do you need the name of the add-on?
Because what is it that you're loading, right? Like.
I think in one case, it was like the require, like this is already what's in the test, which is like
So
and then
but
I think
XXX,
that's the directory isn't that the directory name?
Yes, but no. This is build, release, and then XXX is the name of the .node file, and that changes from test to test. So if we could have
right. Yeah. But that's so we need a mapping from. Like this sent entry point needs to basically provide this name, right?
Yeah.
And that name needs to match what's in this require.
Yeah. Right, but the test runner sooner or later is going to iterate over all the directories, right?
Yes. Yeah, like it needs to iterate over each of the directories, calling set entry point to start with.
So then we already have the name of the directory somewhere in a list over which it's iterating, right? And so that's the one that distinguishes one test from another, right? And so we might as well make the contents of the directories identical in terms of what files are in there and what the names of the add-ons are declared to be.
Right. We need the JavaScript file to have like this XXX better be the same name as the directory.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and you're right.
As a directory. No, not as a directory, right? Because the dot there is the directory, right? Because it's off of the current directory, which is different for each test, right? So the current directory for this require statement is the directory, right? So the test runner knows that, and so then we can just replace XXX with binding.node, and then we agree that that all directories will produce something called binding.node, right?
Well, but actually it's not like the binding.node. Yeah. I guess like it's just in terms of this, whatever this name is passed in,
yeah,
needs to match this guy here. And so whatever that is, like, yeah, if you're saying you're right, like if we don't have it to be binding.node or whatever, that might make it easier. Although, is that true?
Yeah.
Like this can't be binding.node in every case.
Why not?
Well, because
like,
well, because if you look at it this way, because then this is the string we're actually going to get, because this is what's in the JavaScript.
Yeah.
So
but we're gonna get that as we're iterating over a list of directories, right?
Yes and no. So when we're doing this, when we're calling set entry point, yes, we will be looking through the directories. When the JavaScript is run, like if we pass the JavaScript, so we just read the characters from the file and we pass it to the engine to say run this.
Yeah.
This exact string is going to be like the exact string is going to be what's passed to the require function.
Yep.
And the require function needs to be able to map from that back to what we call to this name here.
Right, and it will be able to do that because we maintain which directory we are currently iterating over. So it's going to know relative to which directory it's ./build/ blah blah blah.
I guess I'm not quite like if every single time require is called, it's ./build -common build type /xx the binding.node, then the require itself will not know how to match that back to the set entry point, because it will be that exact string. Like it's not going to be any other string. It's going to be that specific string.
I understand that. Yeah, because that's what's in the JS file, right?
Right.
Okay, so then the implementer of require is going to need to know which test is currently being iterated over.
Right. Like what I had in mind is like this would be, say, the name of the directory. If the directory is like test function.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah. If we did that, then okay. So if we reinterpret that, then basically what we're going to say is we're going to sort of abuse the notation and say like it's like the dir name. Well, no, that doesn't work though, right? Because we can't change that string, right?
Here, yeah, right. So let's look at what so if I go into test. I go into
what
JS,
is there currently?
JS native API, and I just pick anyone, right?
Yeah. Well,
so it actually says test array, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's okay.
It doesn't always say that. It doesn't always say that.
Yeah, back to your point is, well, we may need to clean up the tests.
Yeah.
But we would like it to say test array, so it's actually unique to the test. So that when we do that, so we can map whatever this string is back to something unique that was called in the set entry point.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's the other convention we could strike, is that the name of the add-on has to match the name of the directory. And then, yeah, we could sort of, yeah, it's still not like conceptually clean because you're using the file name to deduce the directory name, you know?
Right. But I'm just trying to work with like, a lot of the tests are already like that. And if we tweaked a few tests to get into this, I don't think too many people in the core project will complain, right?
Yeah. Okay. This is actually not bad because conceivably you could have a binding.jip that creates not one add-on, but that creates all the add-ons, right? And they all have different names, and the name happens to be the name of the test, right? And then you could just have one subdirectory of JS native API technically, right?
Right. And actually, I mean, I was thinking this allows us to build one thing. Like we basically just build, instead of building multiple add-ons for each test, it's just one add-on, one binary that we've compiled all of the tests into.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go with that.
And so Vladimir, does that match in any way what you already did, or make sense from?
Yeah, it makes sense. I also found like it was much easier if this module name is kind of very specific. I actually had more trouble with generic one, as far as I remember. And you're right, like one of the benefits, if we compile all these tests in one single DLL, it will be, I mean, this part of the testing suite, it will be easy if they're all unique. Wasn't big.
Okay, so that's as long, yeah, so if that makes sense to you in terms of, it would take us tweaking some of the tests, but I think we could make the argument that that makes sense. So,
so this entry point, it's pretty much for modules, right? Like just for me to understand.
This is basically for each test. Like, so today, for each test, we build a separate add-on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's basically, we want to have a separate entry point for each test. So we could build it all into one binary, but this is telling the runtime. Basically, we need to map the require. In the test itself, it says require this, and out of that require, we need an object, right? And a node API object. And so the set entry point basically says, well, here's the function to call to get me the object that I need. And it'll have to do a little bit more, but like basically it can call that function. And I think in that function, in the function that's passed in there, it effectively needs to, so in test runners actually call set entry point for entry points, right? The name will be the directory coming the test. So that gives us the link. And it will be passed the function that we need, that the runner needs to have provided is this nappy, this init value, because that's already in the test too. And that's how the current add-ons return an exports object.
Right.
And that's the object that you can then use in the JavaScript to, call the methods that have been bound to the native add-on. But in this case, when you require, it'll end up calling this, it'll return this exports. The require basically returns that object, and then that should now be usable just like it was in the add-on, even though it's running, in the JavaScript.
Yeah, I think I implemented something very similar.
Okay.
Mechanism. Yeah, like we can. What definitely we need to have for each, if we start to build kind of targeted Node API implementation. For each DLL, we need at least another two required methods. One of them to create environment, another one to destroy environment. So something which pretty much not part of our Node API, but something which will require for tests. So then we create.
Definitely right. So set entry point, the name will, so we pass in. So, but I think what I was thinking is that the require implementation is where it should basically create the env. So the test runner doesn't necessarily need to know anything about the env. But when the set entry point is called, it needs to take that function. So it basically needs to store that function somewhere. When the engine is then running JavaScript and sees a require, the require implementation says, okay, I got to look up that function. Great. Now I've got to invoke it with an env. So it's got to create an env however it wants to. It'll actually need to create an env and create an exports object and then invoke this function. So the test runner wouldn't know about an env necessarily.
Interesting.
Does that make sense? Like it's that the require is basically hiding that bit, because when you require them, it's not actually an add-on in this case, but you're requiring that particular function. I guess it's equivalent. It's a virtual module. You're saying require this, behind the scenes, whatever it needs to do in terms of being able to provide an env and provide an exports is the implementation would do.
Yeah, I see your point. I think like in this case, if we have a standalone, like if we have requirement to run generic script like you wrote it up, so maybe you're right. Like pretty much this environment can actually came in into this initialization point, so technically it can be DLL. It's interesting.
Right, and you're right for the pre-validation, although even in the pre-validation one, it might need to say just it's going to validate, like I can call set entry point and then I can run JavaScript And in that JavaScript, there's a require, and as long as that require returns the matching thing, that's what it would be trying to validate, right?
Right, right. Oh.
I was just looking for like, what this, it's because the existing code already has this exact function, right?
I honestly had a lot of issues with this function because especially if we want to have all our tests to be compiled in single DLL, effectively it's the same symbol exported from multiple C units. So in implementation, I had to define this macro init for each individual. So it was one of the reasons like I couldn't run all tests from one single CPP file. I had to create one CPP file per each test directory, because inside of each test, before I include this C implementation, I had to redefine this init as a macro with some unique symbol, if you like.
Yeah, I think in this case, so that may be like as part of our tricky part of each one of them. Like this function will have to be unique. It doesn't need to be does it need to be an exported function? Probably.
Well, at least if we can somehow probably add some macro that makes this symbol to be kind of local, because right now it's global symbol.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I effectively have multiple C files with global symbol in it, and actually the linker will be not happy about it.
So I think that's like in our existing test suite. You already said there was like a common, like in here, there's this entry point, right?
Yeah, but the way the way this entry point works is it just assumes that there's an init function, right, which is visible globally, right? So basically, the way we've structured our test suite encourages that each test be its own binary in this case, right? Whereas we cannot really load all of them into one binary without making changes and without naming the entry points differently.
Right, but I'm just wondering, like, can we modify just this one file so that it will?
Because look at the test array.c. Yeah, so go back up to test array and look at test array or whichever, doesn't matter which one. Yeah, that doesn't matter which one. They're all the same.
Right. So here we are. Yeah,
they all have the same structure. So just go to open test typed array.c and go to the bottom. Right. So we have extern c start an API value in it, right? So this is a function that is globally visible across compilation units, right? And all of them have the same name, capital I in it, right? So if you try to link these together, it's going to say, the symbol's already defined here, right? And it's going to say, it's defined in like 27 different places.
Sure.
So yeah, this discourages having them all in one binary.
But that's actually something that would be relatively, so it's like, I'm just thinking of like steps. That's something that could be mechanically changed, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like basically as a step, you sync over the latest version of the tests, and then you can run a very simple script that will go through and change the inits to be the init with the name of the thing, right? Like that's.
Yeah. But that's another build step, right? That's the.
But that's okay.
Okay.
I don't like that's doable, right? Like for me, if you can automate it, then it's practical.
Yeah. Okay. So you use a script to grab the latest snapshot, and the script post processes the whatever it grabs, and then that's what you have.
The following post processing would be required. So let's just convert.
Alternative can be a little bit different. Like I mentioned, then we compile this C function. We just simply pass the compiler with definition symbol saying like init is actually macro, and we define it to something blah. So technically, with this case, we don't. Physically change.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could. That's a good point.
Yeah. So what was it that we could do instead?
basically instead of setting the file, you can compile it with minus capital D init equals init test array.
Okay.
So then you don't need to change the file. It's just the way you compile it. That's probably simpler.
Okay.
The only caveat that whoever wants to bring this test file now, like to their own environment, like we discussed last time, like they had to do it every time themselves.
Only if they want one binary for all tests. If they want one binary for each test, then they need to do nothing, right? Because then init will be unique to the binary. So it depends on how they design their test suite, right? Like we've chosen to sort of bundle them all together, and then you need the minus D in it. But if you make one binary per test, then you don't.
Yeah, we can probably iterate on it and see how it goes. Like, so currently I just simply define it in a code as a macro. But yeah, I definitely don't like ideas that we change in source codes as a first step. It's just
yeah.
No, if there's a better way, so building notes maybe. So basically, what was it? Using minus D.
Yeah, init capital I lowercase everything else equals, and then I don't know, init same thing equals itself underscore test name. Oh no, not minus D.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Like that. Any spaces?
No spaces.
No spaces. There must be no spaces.
Build notes. There. We need to use the following for each test file.
Yeah, to rename the entry point.
Rename entry point.
Yeah, and if we can also remove D after equality sign. Like,
right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Oops. No, but yeah. There we go.
Where XXX is the
name of the test.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. See, we actually did this by hand in node.on API, because there we do have all the tests in one binary, and we do have like init object wrap, init array, init symbol.
Right. Yeah, and there'll be like we would be introducing our own way of building these components. So there may be some interesting part about like how do we make that, like say there's a new test added, how does that just automatically get, how easy is it to set it up so it will just automatically include all of the things, right?
Well, for directory name in subdirectories, GCC minus D init equals init underscore directory name.
Yeah.
That's how that would happen.
Yeah, so that's okay, and this is, that's good. That'll extract that out.
Yeah.
Any other gotchas? Okay, this was, I can see a typo there, edit.
Oh, basically, as you talk about like all the special cases, it was one test which I couldn't run at all. If you go inside of a test generic or generic, right? There is some kind of code, and especially like you mentioned somewhere here, or test general, yes. One of the reasons we're using this file systems and stuff is basically we're going inside of V8 unit test suite, and we actually bringing in V8 tests and running them. So thankfully, it's one thing which I couldn't do. It's why I didn't even need to do all this file system and stuff. So I guess we need to decide what we want to do with all these V8 tests. Should we can just simply have a copy of them? If you look inside of test general, we'll see how they've been used. It's very kind of a interesting approach.
Right. And I guess even like, it's interesting that it requires, like, this is a node specific thing that's being, same with these other ones like FS and Path. You're basically requiring Node to run some of the like JavaScript things, not to run, because we've tried to separate it out so you could run it just the JavaScript subset, right?
Yes.
So
the question, I guess, is like, was that stuff that needed to be tested? Well, I wasn't sure whether it's like, does it make sense to test that for every JavaScript implementation, or does it, and it just happens to use these node things to test them, or is it that it doesn't make sense to test them?
I don't know. I just don't remember what exactly was the testing there.
Right. These were the ones that like did more than what I'd covered here in terms of like, require or assert.
Yeah.
Some of them I thought like this FS one, this one test instance of, we might be able to refactor the test.
Yeah. So yeah, the same thing happened when I was porting to JavaScript. There was sort of a back and forth, like a cross pollination. On the one hand, I was changing JavaScript to support what we needed, and on the other hand, I was changing the tests to not use so much Node.js specific stuff. So yes, this is going to have to happen again. Like we're going to have to feel which way the push goes. Like, is the push towards the test runner implementing these things, or is the push more towards the upstream test suite removing these things because they are not, JavaScript engine related? So we're going to have to make that judgment call as we're porting the tests one at a time, I think.
Well, it's more like, in my mind, it would be like if we can get all but these tests running, that's a pretty good step.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you look at each of these and say, well, do we actually need it to run?
Exactly.
And like you said, which do you do? Is it that can you simplify the test in the node front so that it doesn't require FS and path? Which I think that one may be the case. And then like the ones that use child process, it would be like, well, maybe you just don't run them.
In terms of like this test env cleanup, for example, this seems more like it should go under Node API instead of JS native API. So one of the tools on our belt upstream is to move these things to Node API if they seem more appropriate. Like if they
agreed. Yep.
If they know about a wider world than just JavaScript, then they belong in Node API.
Yeah. But it was nice that it's not a huge list. So
yeah, and bearing in mind that this is not, the granularity of this is not necessarily an entire directory, right? We may need to like
you could break them up.
Test.js apart, and just do some tests in Node API. Yeah. So it's a bit of work, but I think it may be worth it because we'll have a nice, crisp, clean, engine agnostic test suite.
Yeah, and those kind of things, again, like I don't see them being objectionable to anybody, right? Like it makes sense. We already have the two. You're right. We already have the two separations, and
yeah, and we're not losing coverage that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so
we only have a few minutes left.
And so I'd like to let everybody know that I've started renaming the JS native API tests. So the name of the C file will be the name of the directory .c. The name of the binding will be the name of directory .node, and so forth. So we should have nice consistency a few PRs later, or at least one PR later.
And for me, I just need to have some kind of help to kind of bootstrap, because I never did development inside of node.js project. I don't know like what type of tool sets you guys use and stuff, but especially for this testing suite, I really need to understand what I use in CMake, what will be kind of suggestion, how the whole is bootstrapping supposed to be.
Yeah, you just need Python. You need Python, Make, and GCC, and that's it. And G++.
That's to build Node, right? Like I think this, what Vladimir's asking is like, okay, we're going to effectively build a new C++ module here.
Oh, right.
What should we use, right? I mean, Node uses JIP, but I don't think anybody would say, let's start something new with JIP. I would tend towards CMake myself.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. CMake is probably best.
Okay. So, because currently what we do in our kind of V8 side, we're just using whatever tool set came from V8. But here we just start, like we'll say it will be CMake driven, the whole thing.
That's the one that's been most discussed in the community in terms of like, if we move off JIP, what would we move to? It's got broad platform support. It's fairly simple. even for Node add-on API, you can today build some add-ons with CMake.
Yep.
So it just seems like a natural fit to me anyway.
Yep.
Simple, well understood.
Yep,
Okay.
+1.
And compiler, you're using GCC for all platforms, so how does it work?
No, Windows uses Visual C++, I think. And so on Windows, we generate like the .sln and whatever thing, and then we build that, and we have like a batch file that builds Node instead of like Python and JIP and finally make files.
And you know, like because I was playing with CMake a couple of years ago a lot. Technically today, MSVC or even like Visual Studio Code, they both support direct CMake invocation. So technically, we don't even need CLN creation anymore. Like Visual Studio today capable to open directory with CMake, whatever. Like
good.
Yeah, I would just do the simple one. If you can do one thing for everything, that would be good, because this isn't really going to be part of Node Core or whatever, right? It's you know. So doing something that's easier and more consistent using the newer stuff, I think, is good.
Yep.
Okay, and another question. Okay, I'll start with CMake here. Another question I have, like, because I need to have something to kind of really run against, and what we agreed that it will be definitely some kind of version of V8, which we use inside of node.js. How we would build this kind of target DLL, like a target shared library, which includes this V8 inside, like is kind of because the easiest way to do it just using V8 tool set, right? Or what? Like any kind of recommendations on this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The question's gonna be like, is there any challenges with reusing the, like, if we pull out the pieces from Node, are they easily going to be able to be built with the V8 tool set?
So
probably,
it's what we do today in V8 side. We pretty much, it wasn't me, it was Tudor from our team who established this build system. I just piggybacked and like, I literally brought some files from node.js about this Node API, and it just compiled. I didn't even know like all details myself.
I kind of think that makes sense to me. Like, although it's I'm just thinking, is there any reason why we wouldn't just, the problem, the challenge we've had is like V8, they used one set, then they used something else, and then they used something else. And I guess part of our problem is that there was a lot of extra stuff. Like in Node, we have other dependencies, right? So changing to what V8 used every time was harder than just, changing it for V8. It was changing it for those other dependencies. In this case, the wrapper around V8 is mostly going to be V8 with a little bit of wrapper stuff, right? Like just the node. So maybe, like in that context, I think sticking with whatever V8 is currently using makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to summarize, we'll have a CMake which will drive the whole process. CMake at some point will kind of bring over the whole this V8 repo, plus some few files from node.js for much implementation of Node API, JS native _ API for V8. We'll put it there, and we use. So technically, CMake will drive the whole thing, but at some point it will use whatever V8 build process to build this DLL, which we're going to test. And then we have our testing suite will be made using CMake, and then we use probably CTest to kind of run the whole thing.
Like ideally, like this repo wouldn't know about the V8 wrapper. Like we could set up something that just says, get a binary from here, like get a DLL from here, run the tests. Right. And so, I see this is the first step. The next step might be would be a project that has the V8 and the wrappers and all that. And but they should kind of be decoupled, right? So that you can say, yep, this one builds a shared library. This one builds code that can load a shared library or link against a shared library and run. But like the building, they could be using totally different build mechanisms. They're not coupled together at all, right? So this project would be CMake to build everything that needs to be built. the project that it's testing can be whatever. It just needs to end up with a library that has the right exploits.
Right.
And then for this, then the CI we would set up for here, we would grab a library from somewhere, like in longer from the next step. It would be that other project that would be building a binary on a regular basis that it could pull in and use to test, or a DLL to it could. Does that make sense?
Right. But yeah. Well, let's say, is it okay if it will be not the first step? Like, if this first step will be just simply kind of going all the way through, and then we can actually.
Yeah,
kind of,
I actually have to.
modular.
I see I'm late for another meeting, so sorry, I got to drop off, but I'll let you continue.
See you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Talk to you later.